Now we're moving to structure.
How you doing?
This is a call to order for our special budget meeting. Could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Martinez.
Here.
Councilmember Medina.
Here.
Councilmember Pats.
Here.
Vice Mayor Bowders.
Here.
And Mayor Donahue.
Here. Do I have a motion for approval of the final agenda for this meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Medina, seconded by Vice Mayor Bowders. Councilmember Martinez.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Pats.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bowders.
Aye.
And Mayor Donahue.
Aye. Public comment for the study session item or items not on the agenda, and if you haven't done so, please fill out a speaker's card. Okay, Brad.
Mr. Mayor, can I just check? Brad, were you looking to speak to the items not on the agenda or at the budget item?
At the budget item, but
I think those are
Mayor Donahue said budget item as well.
Yeah, that's what it says on there.
Yeah, it's
Agenda.
for either one.
Is that what staff intended, to do two public comments? Because we'll public comment after the presentation, I'm assuming.
Right.
Right. I would recommend that if the speakers would like to speak on items not on the agenda, this is the time to do it. And then if the speakers would like to speak to the budget item, that they could come and speak after the staff presentation.
Okay, well,
Okay, I thought so. Thank you.
Thank you.
okay, thank you. Any speakers for items not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none. Ex parte communications. Seeing none. Action items, presentation and review of the city proposed budget for fiscal years 2017-18, 2018-19.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, staff is presenting for the first time the proposed two-year budget that is going to show all of the funds and will incorporate council direction from the July 25th council meeting, including incorporating the fiscal policy, instructions regarding capital improvement plan, and incorporating the budget balancing strategies given our current fiscal constraints. Staff will return on September 19th with a recommendation that the City Council approve this two-year budget, or as you may amend it this evening. Last Friday, the Budget Advisory Committee conducted a thorough review of the budget and heard public comment before finalizing their recommendation to the council, and our finance director will be recapping those summary discussions. Staff will return to the council in January, February timeframe, if not earlier, with updates on the budget, revenue and expenditure performance, data from our revenue study, and other developments that will continue to help guide us as to the next steps. It is important and necessary that the City Council approve a two-year budget. However, with the information that we currently have available, the next phase then is to continue our operations planning that will deliver the best possible public services and retain excellent staff to deliver those services. We will continue to work with labor groups to identify these opportunities. And with that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to our Finance Director, Susan Hsieh.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. The proposed budget was presented to the Budget Advisory Committee on September 1st, and the committee recommends approval of the budget. The committee expressed concerns about the cost increase from Oakland for library services and recommended staff to identify cost-effective ways to deliver services. The committee recommends shifting funding to the disaster fund from library services, and I will provide more details later. The committee recommended that staff and management continue to work together to avoid reductions of staff and service levels. Next, I will provide an overview of the budget. This budget focuses on long-term fiscal sustainability and reflects strategies to reduce costs and pay down the city's unfunded pension liability. The budget also proposed to redirect available resources to other programs to smooth future costs. While a revenue study is underway to identify viable options, this budget is balanced with cost savings. The city's budget philosophy guides the development of this budget. These principles ensure that the city maintains a sound financial position. Next, I will provide an overview of the citywide expenditures. The annual appropriation for all funds is over $90 million for each of the 2 budget years. The general fund budget is $40.3 million. And the general fund budget is balanced without drawing into reserves. The cost reductions approved by the City Council on July 25th are incorporated into this budget, except for the K-9 program. After further evaluation, staff conclude that it is important to retain this program to reduce police officer safety risks. The cost is offset by savings from other programs. Staff recommend to restore this program. The fee increase approved by the City Council is also reflected in the budget. The expected savings from the paydown of unfunded pension liability are also included in the budget. The table on the slide presents the savings in the next 7 years. Please note that expected savings will be lower if CalPERS reduce the discount rate further after 2021. The City Council make a wise decision to pay down the city's unfunded pension liability. At the Budget Advisory Committee meeting, we discussed strategic financial planning. We need to plan ahead to smooth future costs, especially during challenging times. In the last budget cycle, and the current budget cycle, staff identified programs that are in need of funding, but resources were not allocated to those programs due to funding limitations. In 16-17, staff took steps to control costs to save money. Staff had planned to redirect unspent resources to these programs. The goal is to avoid spikes in costs and relieve general fund pressure by making one-time contributions to those programs. The proposed transfers presented on the slide were discussed by the Budget Advisory Committee. The committee recommends shifting at least $250,000 from library services to the disaster fund. The proposed transfer to the Information Technology Fund is quite significant. The IT fund relies on contributions from the general fund and fees from development projects. Staff lower the revenue estimates based on expected development projects. By making this one-time contribution, the general fund does not need to increase its annual contribution substantially in this budget cycle and the next budget cycle. The money will be used to support important projects that will help the city to improve efficiency. Some of the projects include the citywide records management project, the communication system for the police department, and the GIS system. Any questions about the proposed contributions to all the different funds? Okay. The projections for revenues are based on the financial information that is available today, and estimates may be changed later during the year based on more updated financial data. Please note that recession factors are not built into this budget in order to reasonably assess the resources that are available to fund city services. There are 2 new revenue sources to the general fund in this budget cycle. An allocation of 25% tax increment revenue to the general fund. In 16-17, we reduced our revenue projection for tax increment revenue in anticipation of funding for the corporation yard. But the Department of Finance denied the funding, and we end up receiving more revenues for all the CIP projects and the capital and the economic development program. We anticipate submitting the funding request to the DOF for the 18-19 ROP cycle. If funding is approved, the allocation to the general fund may be reduced in 17-18 and 18-19. If that is the case, we may need to draw into the program reserves we just discussed earlier. A $500,000 grant from Alameda County is expected to support Emeryville go-around. Funding is expected for 5 years. This chart presents the general fund revenue trends. The 17-18 revenues are projected at $40.3 million. The 16-17 results are in line with the amended budget. As you can see from the chart, we did really well in 15-16 due to some new revenues and one-time revenues such as license and permits. We don't expect this level of revenue in this budget cycle. This pie chart presents the 17-18 general fund expenditures by program. Expenditures are projected at $40.3 million. As a service organization, our significant costs are associated with salaries and benefits. The 17-18 general fund staffing costs are projected at $21.5 million. It's more than 50% of the general fund budget. And the citywide operating staffing costs are budgeted at $24.9 million. Police and fire comprise 52% of total expenditures. Our significant benefit costs are associated with pension contributions. The numbers presented here are taken from the June 2016 CalPERS valuation reports that were just issued last month. Pension costs include normal costs and contributions for unfunded pension liabilities. As you can see from the table, the annual contribution for unfunded pension liabilities will more than double in 7 years from $2.3 million to $4.9 million. The 5-year capital improvement program has been updated to reflect new projects, grant awards, and allocations between projects and funds. Please keep in mind that CIP projects rely on fund balance and projected revenues. Since we are discussing CIP projects, I want to talk about the accounting for operating expense and capital expense. Our budget policy states that appropriations for operating expense lapse at the end of the fiscal year. That means unspent balance at year-end cannot be carried forward to the next fiscal year. On the other hand, capital appropriations are not subject to lapsing at the end of the fiscal year. That means unspent balance is carried forward to the next fiscal year. When we assign resources to new projects, we can only assign available fund balances, not resources that have been assigned to existing projects. And Andrew will discuss CIP projects at a more detailed level.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. What we have here is a brief table included in with some of the key projects are highlighted, as well as some of the ones that have been new or have changed a little bit, as Susan mentioned, some of the redirected funding. And those, as we mentioned, the San Pablo Midblock Crossing is one that you may want to discuss. It's one that we're, with the new funding from SB1, is in the budget here placed for your approval or consideration in 17-18 and 18-19. The other one, the Powell Street corridor, it's not just traffic safety, but it's a safety study along the corridor. And then those and the electric vehicle charging stations. And the funding for electric vehicle in the Powell Street corridor traffic study is coming from a project which had been identified for solar panels in the parking lot here behind Civic Center. And we are redirecting that into electric vehicle charging and the traffic safety study instead. The other key projects that are, or highlight projects you can see there, I'm happy to answer any questions on those and any of the other projects as well. I don't know more.
Any questions about this aspect of the budget?
The item that's the San Pablo
Yes.
Midblock Crossing, I understand that we need that for SB1 purposes to be in there on September 15th. If the council chose to change its priority in year 1 or 2 for any reason, we can do that after that time still, correct?
That's correct.
Great.
The document that needs to be submitted to the commission can be changed.
Thank you. I have no more questions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
This concludes our presentation. Any questions or comments?
Clarifying questions?
Nice to be prepared.
Public comments. Brad?
Obviously a pro.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members. My name is Brad Helfenberger, and I'm here to speak on behalf of CAMP, which is the labor group that represents Emeryville's confidential and management staff. Last Tuesday, I sent you a letter that outlines what the proposed staff reductions will mean in terms of our ability to deliver city services, as well as an alternative solution. Outside of collective bargaining, CAMP has never taken a position on a city council action. However, in this case, we feel compelled to do so because some of the proposals are being considered threaten the delivery of high-priority services to the residents of Emeryville and the livelihoods of some of our colleagues. We have presented a solution very similar to one offered by SEIU. Allocate a portion of the general capital fund to the costs of staff involved in capital projects. Currently, this is being done for public works staff, but it can also be done with economic development staff and others who work in capital projects. It can be done without dipping into reserves. It can be done without utilizing one-time funds. And it is a sustainable solution well into the foreseeable future. Your labor union has offered the suggestion. Now your management group is telling you the same thing, and it merits serious consideration. You are the elected leaders in this community, which simultaneously makes you the leader of the city as an employer. We often hear City Council talk about best practices. With regard to staffing and tough budget times, the best practice is to find a way to keep your people so they can continue delivering maximum services. Using the Boomerang Funds to help balance your general fund budget is also a best practice. We have done an informal survey of neighboring cities, and every single city that we surveyed is already doing this. Whatever action you choose to take tonight and on September 19th, I implore you to explore every possibility and make every effort to prevent the loss of these positions. Even if you pass this budget as is, you can still provide direction to consider our proposal and any other possible alternatives. The solution can then be implemented during the mid-cycle adjustments before next July. We are your partners in this process, and together we can work toward a solution that will save people's jobs while preserving our ability to carry out your agenda and without threatening Emeryville's financial security. Thank you.
Joyce?
Good evening, Mayor Donahue and City Council members and City staff. I'm Joyce Jacobson. I have read the materials that were presented to the Finance Committee last Friday, and I'm tremendously impressed. They were excellent, and I learned a great deal reading them, things this high. And I just want to thank the city manager and her staff for producing a document that was so well organized and so readable. I'm very pleased with what I read there. Overall, I think this is a good budget. It's balanced and adheres to the principles that you have laid out, which were shown a little while ago, for budget philosophy. Especially, I was pleased to see that you're maintaining reserve funds and adding one-time monies to reserve funds, not only the general fund, but several other funds. So I think that part is very, very good. I disagree with one area of expense, and that is the implementation of the Fair Work Week. I think this is a very large new expense that is being added to the budget, and it's not a one-time expense, it's an ongoing expense. It involves hundreds of thousands of dollars. At a time when we have looked at cuts throughout all the city departments and that we are considering laying off staff, I do not understand why the Fair Work Week monies weren't also reviewed for cutting. I feel they should have also been put on the chopping block, not eliminated, but reduced. These are my priorities for Emeryville. There are three that are equal and fit into each other. One is to maintain a livable city for the people who live here. Second is to meet the needs of the businesses, large and small, because they generate the revenues that keep the city going. The third is to continue to maintain and support the very capable staff that we have in Emeryville, because they do the work, they provide the service, and we need them. When it comes to implementing the Fair Work Week, that's a lower priority for me. That comes below these first three things. And it's very hard for me to understand why we would be spending a huge amount of money on hiring consultants at the same time that we are cutting staff. And I think this budget item has not been very well discussed in public or written about.
Thank you. Jean Goldman.
Hi, I'm Jean Goldman, a resident of Emeryville and a member of the Public Art Committee. And I'm here tonight to ask the city manager and the council to reconsider the elimination of the position of Coordinator 2 in the Economic Development Department. From our understanding, this position is responsible for the administration and development of the Cultural District program that the city was just designated. Wonderful, wonderful opportunity that we've been given. This position is also responsible for the development of the Center for the Arts, something we've all been looking forward to for many, many years, and for support for small businesses. Without this position, will these programs and initiatives be carried out? And if so, how? We, the Public Art Committee, are concerned for these initiatives, which are critical to the ongoing support of the arts in Emeryville. So we strongly urge that you not eliminate this position and the staff person who was hired to carry out these initiatives. Thank you.
Keeley Nelson.
Good evening, Mayor Donahue and City Council. I'm Keeley Nelson. I'm an Associate Civil Engineer, work for the Public Works Department here at Emeryville. And I just want to say that I've only been here for 2.5 years. I have about 12 years experience, and I love working here. I love my coworkers and the people I work for and the residents of Emeryville, and I never want to leave. And what I've learned in my years, my limited years, is that the people make all the difference, and my coworkers make all the difference to me. They're what motivates me in the morning and what keeps me productive throughout the day. And when you cut them, it obviously makes me sad. But even if you don't care about my happiness, I feel like you care about what Public Works does for the city, and you care about those CIP projects. When you cut somebody, it's a ripple effect. And even if they're not in Public Works, I depend on them, and I depend on the people who depend on them. And everybody you're cutting is going to affect my ability to get things done, and my coworkers' ability to get things done. And we're we're at capacity right now, and we're very talented and we're very committed, but it worries me that you're willing to cut the people that we rely on and expect us to get that long list of projects done and more. So I ask that you reconsider and listen to all these really talented people and their ideas. Thank you.
Diana Keena.
Good evening, Mayor Donahue, council members. I'm Diana Keena, and I'm a city planner in the Community Development Department. When a city faces a long-term financial challenge, it can contract in fear, or it can reach out to attract activity that will lead to increased revenue. Years ago, when Oakland was in a financial challenge, it invested in renovating City Hall and City Hall Plaza, creating City Hall Plaza, which helped enliven the downtown. In response to the PERS changes, Martinez is hiring an economic development coordinator, maybe ours, to improve its revenue base. Emeryville can capitalize on its designation as an arts district by promoting itself and working with a developer who has offered to turn the building behind City Hall into an arts center, the keystone of the Park Avenue District plan. The city has attracted grant funding for several capital projects. To build them, it will need project management staff and all the people that they work with. The city has been a leader in adopting worker protections, which give workers more to spend if there's staff to implement them. Council places a high priority on parking meters to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to produce revenue. Their success depends on having parking enforcement staff. The city has attracted mixed income, family-friendly residential development. The safety of the population depends on police officers having information to help them solve crimes. The community depends on its recreation program to provide events and classes where people can gather and share culture and fitness. It takes a hard-working recreation manager to put these programs together. The city has a great staff. Its HR staff work hard to recruit and retain good people and to keep absences low and performance high with a low-cost health education program. Without these HR staffers, good employees will leave and no staff will be available to recruit their replacements. Putting layoffs in the second year of the budget is better than putting them in the first year, but it means that if the council changes its mind later, these good people will be gone. So will be the staff to recruit new ones and the city's reputation as a good employer and its ability to attract good people. This could create a trickle-down effect on the remaining staff who, increasingly burned out, may also leave. There is so much more in the capital improvement program than the current staff, let alone a reduced staff, can build in the next few years, that it makes sense for the city to put realistic timelines on the capital improvement projects and use annual property tax revenues and annual general fund income to fund an operating budget that can implement the capital improvement program and cultivate programs that will lead to increased revenue. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine Furpo.
Catherine has yielded her time to myself, and I think I'm the next speaker.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Amber Evans, a Community Development Coordinator for the City of Emeryville, and I've come before you twice before to say don't cut people. I'm not going to come before you again a third time to ask that. My colleagues have. What I'm here tonight to talk to you about is what you will need to cut then. Your managers have shown you have the money not to have to do this. Money's not going to go off and be in some account and make little money babies. If it's not spent, it's not invested, and it's unused. What is going to generate money is activities that pour into our community and make things happen. You've made proposals to have layoffs. You've put them off for a year, and that's great for the individual employees. But I believe it will lead to a slowly cascading catastrophe. Big word, there's a lot of them happening right now. but we need all the good people doing the good things that you've all committed to do to this city. But what I don't understand is how you believe we can carry out those activities, those promises made to the electorate. And I don't understand why you think you need to show the electorate that you've tightened your belt strap and everything's going to be better now that we have less PERS to pay for these people, when we're the people that deliver those promises you've made to the electorate. Tonight, I think you should prioritize and understand truly which are your priorities that you're willing to pay for the overtime. Because if we keep this list, you will have to pay for overtime, just like it was done for the police when those were critical services, and you decided, no, that was too high a cost. Well, when you ask us in all the other departments to carry out the beautiful list of things we're going to do for quality of life, overtime is the only opportunity for us, or we need to critically whittle down some of these projects. What am I talking about? The Arts Center that Jean just mentioned, bond-funded development, the Cultural District, and excuse me, this list is long and that's why I asked for extra time. The Facade Program, the Fair Work Week, grant management and compliance, housing development, the mural program that comes to you tonight, the marina program that will come in 2 weeks, art implementation, parking enforcement, parking rollout of paid meters in a residential and business tiered parking program that will be before you tonight, police analysis, recreational services, small business assistance, and sadly most of what I just mentioned are the new programs, which would assume that staff are not working on critical things already, spending our time doing what has been promised. And when you break the covenant with employees, like you're doing now with an employee that has over 20 years of experience, loyalty cannot be bought. Most of the staff working here care deeply about the city. We're passionate about the work we do. We want to better the lives of those living here. But if you turn this into just a job for us, where instead of what we do is noble, and we're just the chumps that stayed and did the work of the people you laid off, not serving them or us, then we cannot continue to participate in that relationship. This is a downward spiral. And if you ask us to juggle too many things, we will fail as jugglers as we are picking up the pieces from the floor. Thank you.
Rue.
Good evening, council members. Miru Desai speaking here as the SEIU Emeryville chapter president. The city currently enjoys a sound financial condition. This is a statement that is in your staff report. It has been in every staff report that has been written since this budget process started. An ironic statement, indeed, especially when it is in the same staff report includes laying off individuals and freezing positions in order to deliver the services. At the end of the day, at this point, you have heard from your entire staff, other than the sworn police officers. Camp's letter has shown you the money, in the words of Cuba Gooding Jr., and they have worked on some of our ideas, and they have further refined them, as your very capable managers can do. So the question that you need to ask yourself, has this option of using the general capital fund ever been discussed? Yes, there was some talk about that we should consider this, but it has never been explained in staff reports or in the deliberations that the council has had as to why they will not work. So I think that the council, I mean, we've been doing this for a while, continuing this meeting to the next another 2 weeks is not going to be the end of the world. I'm asking you to continue it in order so that you have some time to absorb the proposals that have been outlined in the Camp's letter, for example. If you decide not to go with the option and stick with the proposal that's in front of you, then as the SEIU president, I'm here to put all managers on notice that I will be issuing a gag order for all these employees who have said that they enjoy working here. And one of the results of when somebody enjoys working here is it does work that is beyond your time. I will be issuing gag orders that we are to take all our breaks and an hour of lunch. And nobody is to work a minute more unless overtime is authorized. In addition to that, SEIU will be looking at how the work gets reassigned, who's working out of class, who's not, and will file grievances as and when it is applicable. But I'm hoping that it will not come down to that. I'm hoping that the council will listen to your staff, the entire staff, and, or give us an explanation. Give us an explanation of why this cannot be done. Give us an explanation of how the work will be reassigned, so that so many of the other members who have mentioned how the ripple effects will impact those who will remain behind. At the end of the day, we do not want Emeryville be to the kind of city that hires in 1 year and then lays off the 1 year later. That is the reputation we cannot afford to have in the long term. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else to speak on the study session? Okay. Betsy.
Betsy Cooley, resident. I just basically wanted to speak up. Betsy Cooley, resident. I just basically wanted to speak up on behalf of what Joyce Jacobson said and what Jean Goldman said. I agree with both of their positions, and also I really do hope. I don't know if you got the email that I had sent earlier today, but I really do hope you can figure out some way to resolve the matter of the laying off of the employees, because I think that I just think that needs to be resolved. It's a small city, and when you take away that number of employees, it does make a difference. And so I would just like to support your trying to figure out a way out of that and keep the employees. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, that closes the public comment for the study session. Okay, do we have some direction to our staff here about how we'd like to go on this? Well, I can just say that I would say that we would never expect our workers to work overtime and fill in for anyone we would lay off. We were talking about a reduction of service, not a hurry up and get it done. I think we have to be a city that values our staff's time and honors a equitable work relationship. So no matter what we decide, I just think that that's the kind of culture we want to keep in our city.
I was going to ask if Susan could go back to one slide. I have just an ask on one piece of this slide presentation that's not the whole budget, obviously. Can you go back to the slide that one? Nope, yep, that one. So I sat in on a 3-hour budget advisory committee meeting on Friday, and I want to thank staff and all the members of the committee and there were members of the public. Brad, Betsy, a number of people who were in this room came that day as well. Thank you for all contributing. This is just one page of a very big conversation. I would like to propose on this particular item, though, since Friday I spent more time looking into these proposals, and I would like to ask us to consider taking $400,000 from library services and moving that to disaster fund, and $50,000 from code enforcement and moving that to disaster fund. And the rationale behind that is that the library services is already budgeted at $250,000 this year, Our contract is for 120. And although I think we're all aware that the City of Oakland is planning on increasing the fees for library services, the $100,000 that would be left from this 500 plus that 250 plus the work that staff is doing to with internally and with the City of Oakland to make the future of library services affordable. I think that the 250 in the budget and 100 is ample money to cover this. And I think my understanding is that code enforcement was looking at anywhere from 200 to 300, and so I would like to propose reducing that to 250, moving that total sum of 450,000 then to disaster fund for $1 million investment. I think everybody is aware that everyone's followed what's going on with Hurricane Harvey, and Irma's offshore at this point. And the city has about $1.3 million in disaster fund reserves, and a city of our size should have approximately $5 million as a general practice to prepare for a disaster. Sometimes can feel like the world is coming to an end when you look outside. There's fires and hurricanes and whatnot, but we're not immune from those issues either. And I just think with this money laid out in front of us as it is, this is an opportunity for us to be proactive on that front so that when the time comes, the city is financially prepared to, or closer to being financially prepared to handle the situation. So that's my one suggestion.
I'd like to lend my support for your suggestions. I also want to thank Vice Mayor Bowders for investing so much time and actually really digging into this budget and putting so much thought into what we need to do. Thank you.
I'm sorry, the ECCL capital reserve contribution, that seems really high to me. Is that annual or is that?
We are planning ahead, actually, so that we can skip the annual contribution from the general fund in the next, couple budget cycles.
It's for smoothing purposes.
Yeah. The strategy.
It's like $5,000 a year for a certain number of years.
First 5 years.
5 years. And then it starts to step up very quickly, 60, 65, 75. And so rather than have a jolt in 3 to 4 years because we're a year and a half in now, I guess, rather than having the jolt of having to suddenly make a change then, the recommendation is that this is unused one-time monies that could be placed there now to give us a 10-year window so we don't have to anticipate making changes in the future that would have to account for the ECCL budget. So we could say no to that, but then we would have in 4 years, we would have to start making much larger allocations from the general fund to it, and there's a one-time opportunity that's there with one-time funds to just put it aside now. So it's planning for it versus having it available.
It struck me. I had 5,000 in my head, so
it does
I'm not usually off by 395,000. So okay, and it's one-time money is what I needed to hear.
Yeah, I had one other item. There is a. There's a community programs fund, fund number 203 in the budget, which is a 258-page document. There is a fund there, and residents came to the last meeting and talked to us about Earth Day and Jazz in the Park and a bunch of other programs. And I know that for a lot of residents, community programming is a priority. And when we looked at it at that time, it was estimated to be between $13,000 and $20,000, which is a relatively small amount of money for a budget of this size. And the commitment we made with staff was that we would look for ways to make that a cost-neutral approach. And upon looking at it further, I think we should still pursue that, but I wanted to propose a backstop for this. And so fund number 203 has about $280,000 in it. It is reserved for community programs. It goes to fund the grant program for arts. It goes to fund our homelessness program. It funds a lot of things that we do. It's funded for about 2 to 3 more years based on what our total costs are. And so my ask would be that we actually not as a line item cut the resident programs, but that we actually fund them from Fund 203 in the budget, and we still remain committed to either finding private donation support to fund those programs in the interim or finding ways to make them cost neutral or reduce it, but then at the very end, no matter what, we have that as a backstop in the budget. So obviously if we find other sources of money for it, it would simply create savings for that fund in the end because it would be budgeted against that fund. So I would also make a request that we make that modification to keep all those programs.
I would support that as well. Does the staff have any comments on on that fund and the impact of that fund to that fund? Feasibility of doing that?
Vice Mayor Bowders made the right, assessment about that fund already. We have money in there to support this level of activities.
Okay.
And so it's not, to her point, though, it's not going to create a problem for the other things we've budgeted?
No, it won't.
Okay.
So it's $20,000, right?
A maximum of $20,000
Sure.
budgeted to that.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Any other questions or comments?
Others have comments, no.
The big choice is, and we talked about this earlier on, boomerang funds, additional boomerang funds, not going to the general fund, going to the general fund and not going to capital improvements. At first, I was for having those boomerang funds go to our general fund to increase our income. Other cities do it, but now hearing about our capital programs, it just seems not wise. So I can't go along with that idea. I want to keep the ratio of 75% going to capital funds, 25% going to the general fund. And I just feel like we have a year to somehow come up with changes that we can keep our staff. But it's better to not start out with a continuous non-funding of our capital program, or we're just not going to, we'll have all the staff to make things, but we won't have the wallet to build things. So, there's, that's my feeling about it.
I just want to, I want to say that nothing about making a budget like this is easy. And I sincerely appreciate everything that each staff member who has spoken tonight and in the past has said. I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to come here, and I hope you don't think, just as I think one commenter mentioned, these aren't just jobs. This is not just a decision for us either. There's a lot of things that go into this, and they compete with one another. And I recognize that this is a very important decision for different people in different ways here. And I take seriously the commitment that was made by the city manager when I asked at the July 25th meeting that she will continue to work to structurally ensure that services are provided to the city, and we recognize that that may result in a reduction of some services because we don't expect everybody to do more with less. And I really appreciate Ms. Nelson's comments about why she comes to work, and your happiness does matter to me. It really does. And I think balancing this against the boomerang funds is hard for a couple reasons. One, we're tying it to tax increment, and that will come and go with the economy. The other thing is that we have a capital plan that has a long list of undone things, and even with the current staffing, we haven't checked many of those boxes, in my opinion. But the reality is that those are things that we have committed to the citizens of Emeryville already before this council existed. And so we have to really balance how we use funds. And I would love to say that we would never shed a job in the city, but I also want to make sure that we have a long-term plan to commit to the promises that have already been made to residents as well. And so, I know that Councilmember Martinez and I think everybody up here is the same, but I know that we have really been looking at revenue opportunities, and, what happens with this budget is not a final chapter to the work that has to be done. So, hearing all of you redoubles my commitment to helping make Emeryville prosperous in a way that makes us flourish and provide all the services that all the residents here deserve. And I just want you to know that personally, this is not an easy decision by any means, but it's one that, for me at least, has come with after a lot of back and forth and trying to balance and weigh all the things that are in front of us. So I appreciate you coming and speaking.
I think that's a nice segue for me, because I hear what you're saying when you talk about the commitments we've made. But I think it's exactly what you said about the revenue and looking for more revenue streams. I disagree with you, Mayor Donahue, in that these capital improvements, I think if the impetus is there, we can take our time and find funding for them. But if we make cuts to staffing now and then we rehire, we get that boom and bust cycle going. And, you know, it's perfect to me that we have the revenue smoothing in front of us. As I think about this, it's the same thing with staff. You want to keep and maintain staff, not have to be turning and changing plans. So while I agree with you that it's really important that we fund our capital programs, I think we as a council should make that a priority, but we should not do that instead of taking our time on the budget and saying for this year, let's keep staffing, let's keep allocations the way we talked at the last meeting, and take the year to find the capital improvements. And I know that'll cost us more next year in the capital improvements, but I think it's worth it in the long term to maintain the level of services, and more importantly, to maintain the quality people that we have in town. So that's my thoughts on the matter.
I also want to appreciate everyone who came to support your coworkers, everyone who came to speak tonight, everyone who really puts their hard work and passion into the city. And I also want to express that tax increment financing it's an unsure thing, as far as I understand. And you know, with the Corp Yard financing hanging in the balance with the Department of Finance, that money that we could be getting may not be coming. That may not be money that we can count on for our general fund. And I also want to reaffirm my support for staff finding solutions in the next year to do what we can to preserve jobs where we can, and also restate my commitment for looking for revenue for the city. That's an ongoing process that will go beyond this budget process, but that's work that needs to be done, and we need to get this budget signed off on. This process has gone on for too long.
I think it's almost redundant to echo the sentiments at this point, but obviously I know it's a lot of investment to come at meeting after meeting and argue on behalf of yourselves and your colleagues, and I thank you for making that effort and for coming out and advocating. This budget's really difficult, and I don't think we're going to suddenly see, you know, revenues exceeding all of our expectations and fixing this problem for us instantly. It's something that we're all going to have to keep on working towards and looking for solutions. We all are committed to trying to keep everyone on staff, and we do think you do amazing work, so thank you so much.
Any further comments? No. Okay, I think you've got some direction from us. Mm-hmm. And I think that we can be finished with this meeting.
Does this require a motion tonight, or is this?
I didn't. Unless there was some specific. Well, actually,
I would like to make so you're not asking us to vote on the budget tonight, correct?
Right.
Okay. I'm going to make a motion to amend the proposed budget, though, to remove $400,000 from the proposed library service transfer, and move that to disaster fund, and move $50,000 from code enforcement, move that to disaster fund, and to ensure that all of the resident programs that were proposed to be cut be funded through Fund 203, the Community Programs Fund, for the 2-year budget cycle. That's my motion.
Second.
Moved by Vice Mayor Bowders, seconded by Councilmember Martinez to make the changes as noted. Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bowders?
Aye.
And Mayor Donahue?
Aye.
Thank you.